The snow fell hard that night in 1887, covering the tiny Montana town of Silver Creek in a white silence that made even the wolves retreat to their dens. Inside a dimly lit cabin at the edge of town, a man named Elias Boone, a quiet rancher known for his solitude, sat by his fire sharpening a hunting knife. He'd lost his wife to pneumonia 3 winters ago, and since then the only sound in his home was the fire crackling and the occasional sigh of a man who'd forgotten how to hope. But that night a knock came at his door, soft at first, then urgent. When he opened it, a frail woman stood there, her face pale under the moonlight, snow melting into her black hair. Her clothes were torn, her lips trembling. She looked Chinese, something rare in that town, and rarer still for a woman to be wandering alone. "I'm sick. I can't walk far," she whispered. Can I stay one night?" Elias stared at her, uncertain. He'd seen the way townsfolk treated outsiders, especially the Chinese workers from the old railroad camps. They were used, cheated, and forgotten, but there was something in her eyes, a mix of fear and exhaustion that reminded him of his late wife on her final night. Without another word, he stepped aside and said, "Come in." Inside, the woman collapsed by the fire. Elias brought her a blanket and poured hot water into a tin cup. Her hands shook as she took it, whispering a quiet, "Thank you, sir." He studied her face in the flickering firelight. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mei Lin," she said faintly. "I was working at the laundry in Helena. The owner died. The men there said they'd sell me to a camp. I ran." Elias clenched his jaw. He'd heard about such things. Men taking women from the Chinese camps, treating them as property. "You're safe here tonight," he said simply. When he helped her to the small bed in the corner, she flinched, as if afraid he might strike her. He stepped back and said gently, "You can rest. I'll sleep by the fire." For the first time, her expression softened. "No one ever speaks kindly," she whispered before her eyes fluttered shut. By morning, she was burning with fever. Elias, without hesitation, hitched his horse and rode through the storm to fetch the town doctor. The doctor, a bitter man named Crawley, followed reluctantly, muttering, "You know they ain't our kind, Boone. You'll bring trouble to your door. She's human, ain't she?" Elias shot back. When they returned, the doctor examined Mei Lin and frowned. "Pneumonia, bad one. She needs medicine and rest. But she'll die before the week's done." Elias refused to believe it. He sat by her side every night, wiping her forehead, giving her spoonfuls of broth. The townsfolk soon found out, whispering behind their backs, "Boone's got himself one of them China girls." They said, "He's lost his mind." But he didn't care. On the 3rd night, Mei Lin woke and found him dozing by her bedside. She touched his arm gently. "Why are you helping me?" she asked weakly. "People don't help strangers." Elias opened his eyes and met her gaze. "My wife died right there," he said, nodding to the bed. "I couldn't save her. Maybe I can save you." Tears welled up in Mei Lin's eyes. "You're a kind man," she whispered. "No one's ever called me worth saving." By the end of the week, against all odds, she began to recover. She walked slowly, leaning on the wall, while Elias chopped wood outside. Every day she cooked a small meal, cleaned his cabin, and spoke softly in broken English. The house felt alive again, like something lost had returned. But not everyone was happy about it. One morning, Sheriff Dugan and 3 men from town rode up to the cabin. Elias stepped outside, wiping his hands on his coat. "Boone," the sheriff said, "folks don't like what you're doing. We don't need no railroad woman stayin' here. Send her away." Elias looked him dead in the eye. "She's sick. She's stayin'." The sheriff spat into the snow. "You're askin' for trouble." Elias didn't flinch, then let trouble come. That night, someone threw a rock through the cabin window. It had a note tied to it, "Get her out before we do." Elias burned the note and loaded his rifle. But Mei Lin begged him, "Please don't fight them. I'll go." He turned to her, his voice steady but full of pain. "You go out there, they'll kill you. Here you live." She stared at him, her eyes shimmering. "Why do you care?" "Because I remember what it's like to lose someone you could have saved," he said quietly. The next morning, when the mob returned, they found Elias standing outside, rifle in hand. "You'll have to shoot me before you touch her," he said. The men hesitated. Boone was no stranger to a fight. He'd worked with them, fought beside them during the cattle wars, but now they saw something in his eyes that made them step back. "You'd ruin your name for her," one shouted. Elias's voice thundered. "She's got more honor than half the men in this town." Then the sound of hooves echoed. Dr. Crawley arrived, holding a paper in his hand. "You idiots best go home," he barked. "I just wired Helena. Turns out there's a reward for finding Mei Lin alive. She's no runaway. She was witness to a killing at that laundry. Men tried to silence her. The mob went quiet." The sheriff cursed under his breath. Elias lowered his rifle slowly and looked at Mei Lin, who stood trembling behind the door. "Looks like the Lord sent you here for a reason," he said softly. Weeks passed, and the snow melted into spring. Mei Lin stayed on, helping Elias with the ranch, tending the small garden. She spoke more English every day, and laughter began to fill the cabin once more. The townsfolk, shamed by what they'd done, started to accept her, first with silence, then with quiet respect. One Sunday, Elias walked into the small church with Mei Lin beside him. Whispers filled the room, but no one dared speak aloud. The preacher looked at them both and said, "We welcome all who seek peace." That day, Elias Boone, once the loneliest man in Silver Creeks, smiled for the first time in years. A year later, the town gathered for the spring fair. Mei Lin ran a small stall selling hand-sewn scarves, each one delicate as a butterfly wing. Children adored her, even the sheriff tipped his hat. Elias stood beside her, his rough hand covering hers. Someone asked, "Boone, you ever think you'd find yourself a wife again?" Elias smiled quietly. "Didn't find her, she found me." And when Mei Lin laughed, it was the sound of home rebuilt, proof that even in a world hardened by hate, kindness could still shock a whole town.